Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 7. New Recruit's Blood Man Meets Family. Kaya started bandaging the wound as best she could. A flesh wound fell right in her expertise. Luckily for Nami, they didn't hit anything vital. It would have been a major problem if they hit anything internal. The suturing took longer than typically from her amateur skill, but at least she didn't make any mistakes. Okay Nami, try not to tear the stitches. Kaya gave her first order to her patient. Any straining on the shoulder and they'd be back to square one. You expect me to go without knocking some sense into those idiots? She sighed and rubbed her shoulder. The one blessing in it all was that it tore through some of that horrendous tattoo on her arm. Fine, but you're my fist, got it? Nami joked, though did have to assure Kaya she wouldn't be punching any of them. Let's go make sure neither of us need to hit them over something stupid. Hey, Jin, what's wrong? Luffy asked Jin, who was still kneeling down where he was. Come on, get up. Victory meal. I didn't win, Luffy. My captain is dead, Jin said coldly, staring at the floor. Which means I may as well die myself. Jin couldn't look up at Luffy. Hopefully he would get the hint and just end his life. He didn't have anything left to live for. Well, if I was your captain, you'd have won. I am your captain now, Luffy declared, shocking everyone around him. So come on and get up. I want food. Luffy was determined for two things: getting Jin to join, and eating at the restaurant he just took down a fleet to save. It's not that simple. I betrayed Krieg. He was the only man I ever respected before. The man I'd see become Pirate King, and you killed him. He deserved to die. You don't. So just shut up and join me already. The two were in a fierce shouting match that had everyone else watching. Could Luffy be more stubborn than a man-demon wanting to die? Why the hell do you want me to join you? I betrayed my last captain, you can't trust me. You betrayed him to save my friends, Luffy said plainly, as he pulled Jin off his knees. You want to join us, you thick-headed jerk. You wouldn't have done that otherwise. Jin gritted his teeth as he was forced to look Luffy in the eyes. Hitting him would do no good. He was right. You're right, you're better than Krieg ever was. If the offer's still. New crew member. Let's celebrate, Luffy yelled before looking around. So, how do we get back to the restaurant? Well, we have to swim. They all looked at Luffy, who scratched his head. Well, we have to anyway. Shishishi. Well, I bet we beat you all there, Luffy said before absorbing the massive amount of blood he had shed on the deck and picking up Nami. She didn't need to be swimming with an injury. Besides, this would be fun. He squatted down and focused on the distant ship. His legs swelled up as he prepared his maneuver. With a sudden bloody discharge they were sent soaring through the air, which made Nami yell in fear and anger, but it was better than swimming with a hole in her shoulder. Luffy landed with a thud on the Baratie, though luckily he left all the blood he absorbed on the shipper as he went. At least, all that wasn't his type. These fights were starting to pile on to his overall form. He swore he had grown an inch, which he had. It took a few hundred people to do it, but it was progress nonetheless. He made quite an entrance as he walked into the restaurant carrying his first girlfriend. Everyone inside brandished a weapon at the boy. He however showed no fear as he walked to a table and set Nami down. Bring me meat, he yelled out, shocking everyone. Zeph stood and walked slowly to the kitchen, abiding the boy's request. Who the hell do you think you are? Do you plan to pay for that? An oddly proportioned man yelled out, ready to beat up the moocher. Nope, Luffy yelled out confidently, staring at the man. But I'm hungry and tired. So I won't fight anyone right now. Then I don't see a reason why we shouldn't kick you out, you bum. We have bigger problems than feeding you. Well, your biggest problem is that I'm hungry. Sideburn guy is gone, so give me my victory steak. What do you want, Nami? I don't think I can eat anything, I feel sick. She groaned as she set her head on the table. What the hell do you mean ease? The man wearing sunglasses inside, a most horrendous atrocity, was quickly shut up as Zeph slammed down a plate stacked with meat. Most looked rare, but the boy was in a rush so he'd get rare. Woo, thanks old guy, Luffy yelled before he started to tear into the meat. Some in more literal ways as he ripped it into more bite-sized chunks. Enjoy. Least I can do for our hero. The rest of you, get to the kitchen and cook for his crew. Zeph ordered, leaving no one left in the room to question the who, how, or why. It gave him a moment to talk with the thick-skulled young man. This whole ordeal had him on edge, and this boy showing up was a bigger headache than relief. Who are you? I'm, Monkey D. So good. Luffy. Luffy couldn't slow down for even a moment to answer. He'd gone from normal to super-sized and back to normal again in such a short time. Meat would surely fix it. Who are you, old guy? You know Nami. She was here earlier, yes. Tried to get us to run away. But fought his entire fleet to save this restaurant, and you don't know who I am. Cocky youngster, that's for sure. Nope. You guys have food. Plus that was fun, Luffy said between bites. His monstrous appetite was limited by his stomach, so he had to slow down. Though it wouldn't be long before his body broke the meat down to everything he needed and supercharged him. Why should I know you? Zeph grunted and looked him over even more. This boy's priorities were downright terrifying. I'm Zeph. You have quite the appetite, young man. Won't be any left for those friends of yours. Thanks. My grandpa says I got it from him. If they want any, they'll hurry. Besides, Nami doesn't like steak as much as me. No one likes steak as much as you, moron. Nami said from her place on the table. That jump was like a roller coaster that was about to be shut down for unsafe conditions. I'm sure someone does. You should try some though. He's way better than Kaya. Luffy said with a smile to the old man. Think you could join us? Kaya could really learn something from you. My travel days are done. I'm going to stay here and keep these hooligans on track. There may be someone who could help you. Speak of the devil, Sanji. Get in the kitchen and stop being useless. You just know no one else in there can cook as well as me, old man. Sanji yelled angrily as he walked to him, staring the man down. His mood had deteriorated from the swim. His hair and his clothes were ruined, two things he put a lot of effort in. The argument, however, didn't stop him from walking to the kitchen and getting to work. That boy, young man, are you in need of a loudmouth pervert who can hardly listen to a word you say? Zeph asked with a smile. No point in hiding who that boy is, lest he be dropped back off after a day. Well, I'm already all those. If he's half as good as you though, I'll take him. Luffy yelled just as everyone else fell in the chairs around him. Zoro picked his head up and groaned. You aren't seriously thinking of taking that dartboard, are you? I don't care if he lays golden eggs, it isn't worth it. Zoro, I swear if we find anything that can do that, you're going overboard before it is. Secondly, we could use a professional chef. Kaya is okay, but we need someone who knows the proper nutrition to provide. Nami said, getting over her motion sickness with good old avarice. I agree with Nami. I could learn a lot from a real professional, but he does seem a little super perverted. Usopp finished Kaya's sentence for her with anger in his voice. He had a good enough reason to dislike him. Shitty curly brow arrow cook. But maybe Zoro hated him more. Well, I'm not leaving anyway, Sanji said as he walked the food to them. Zoro had a distinct feeling his would spit or ashes somewhere inside, but he was too hungry to complain anyway. Not until I get some damn recognition. Cook well and you'll get your recognition. Your slop is inedible, Zeph yelled, preparing to kick the arrogant brat out the door if he had to. Hey old guy, why are you lying? Luffy asked, rubbing his stomach happily. I'm not lying. Sanji can't cook a decent meal to save his life. Shishishi. Totally lying, Luffy said as he looked at his friends, who were scarfing down their food. Zoro was now certain Sanji put out a previous cigarette inside his, but it still tasted delicious. Even if they weren't eating like, well, me, I can feel you lying. Ha, I knew it. Say it, old man, say it, Sanji yelled, a mix of pride and anger. He had trained too many years to not get recognized now. Will you get out of my damn restaurant if I say it? Zeph yelled back, hobbling towards him. If I have to sprout wings and fly, Sanji replied, staring the old man down. Shishishi. I love a good show, but I have to go kill that Arbong guy. Luffy said as he stood, walking towards the two. What the hell is with you two? You know how good of a cook he is. You know he thinks you're a good cook. What's the problem? He has to say it. That's the His voice was caught in his throat with one death glare from the boy who just walked between them. Let's try again. Zeph, you think Sanji is a good chef? He looked at Zeph, who gave no response. The puff of air was all Luffy needed. Sanji, that is the best you'll get of the geezer. Are we done? It's not that simple, Luffy. I owe him my life. Sanji yelled angrily, shaking off the fear that had invaded his being. Hey, I just saved both of you. Luffy yelled angrily back at Sanji, who looked at him angrily. See, I'm right, so why not make it up to both of us by living your life, letting gray hair here live his, and joining my crew? Zeph closed his eyes and smiled, before he started to snicker. To think I labeled him a fool. Well, Sanji, you don't owe me anything anymore, but you and I both owe this boy a life. Damn it, Sanji gritted his teeth and ground his foot into the floor. He was right, I just owe you both now. I owed you first, so that's what I repay first. How are you going to repay him? By staying here forever. Old guy here wants you to leave. Well, he doesn't get to decide that. I owe him my life, damn it. Then live it, you fool. Zeph finally yelled, fuming with anger. I did not give my food and my leg for you to be crammed up my ass. He had reached a boiling point, and this was the overflow. You're either going to walk out of here and make something of yourself, or I'll kick you out. Sanji froze in shock at the outburst. The words were kind by normal berating standards. They also revealed why he tried to push him out the door every chance he could. Say it then. For once in your life, give me a damn compliment. You want a compliment? You're still the sniveling little brat who needed to be complimented for every good thing he cooked. The only thing that's changed since then is that your food doesn't taste like you pulled it from the garbage can. Sanji couldn't help but smirk. That's as close as I'll get from you, isn't it? Sanji asked, to which he got a grunt. Guess I'll take it in and run, Sanji said as he turned towards the door. It really would be the best he got from the aging cook. They walked outside and yelled for Johnny and Yosaku to bring it to them. Those two would have probably gotten Zoro to fight if they had been with them, either through riling him up or being attacked by annoyed pirates. Luckily they were able to stay out of trouble and bring the ship near. 2 new crew members in one day. Think we'll need a bigger ship, Captain? Zoro asked Luffy as they stood and waited on the ship. Sanji and Zeph were having a goodbye ceremony of sorts Zoro couldn't be bothered with. Maybe, probably, but Mary has the perfect room, so I like her. Besides, Kaya gave Mary to us. We won't replace her unless we have to, Luffy said as he watched Sanji stand and wipe the tears from his eyes. Shishishi. Just be glad you don't have to double bunk with Sanji, yet. Luffy teased as he left Zoro to curse the idea. He still needed to talk with Jin and Nami. So, Captain, who are we taking on now? You brought down the Krieg pirates on your own, what next? Are you going to fist fight Arlong? Jin asked jokingly, but his eyes filled with fear as Luffy looked at his fist. Wait, that was a joke. Nami, set sail to Coconut Village. Luffy yelled, making everyone look at him. Luffy, it's Kokoyashi. I've told you this. Nami sighed as she walked to the rudder. Just because it sounded kind of like coconut, it's all he would call it. You can't be serious, Captain. Even Krieg didn't want to take on Arlong. He's not even human. He's rumored to be part Sea King. Jin was hysterical, but Luffy's wide smile brought him out of it. I'm serious, I'm not Krieg, and I certainly am not human. Luffy said in his cheery tone. He certainly eliminated Jin's fear of Arlong, even if it was replaced with fear of his captain. Well, I'm going to talk to Nami. Play nice with everyone. But wait, Luffy, Jin yelled as Luffy ran to Nami. It was no use, Luffy had intended to leave him on that note, so that's where it would stay. He hated it when people would leave them on such a cliffhanger. So Nami, what can you tell me about Arlong and Kokoyashi? Luffy asked, getting the important part correct for her sake. Nami smiled a little. She wasn't certain if that was intentional, but it was funny nonetheless. Well, I grew up there. My mother Belmir lives there, so does my sister Nojiko. Nami said with a small smile as she thought of them. As for Arlong, he's a heartless bastard. When we were kids, we could hardly get by. We lived on tangerines and stealing from people. Arlong charged everyone just for the privilege of staying alive. If you couldn't pay, he would kill you. Belmir's smart. She knew to hide us from him, so she didn't have to pay for us all, but we were found out. Arlong was going to kill her after he found out, but, Genzo, the mayor, he gave his life for us. Mom didn't get out of bed for days. We still needed to get money, so I made a deal with Arlong. If I worked for him, my family's debt is ignored. If I get 100 million belly, he'll let the entire village go. Luffy stared wordlessly at her. After a few very silent moments, Luffy hugged her. She wasn't crying, but that didn't mean she wasn't upset. Luffy took the hat off of his head and placed it on her head. That's my most valuable possession. I've fought anyone or anything that's hurt it. It's the only thing I left home with that I would never leave. It's also a promise that I'm going to make Arlong pay for you. Nami started to cry, heavily. She saw the way he treated that hat. It was a priceless artifact he just so happened to wear. Now she was wearing it. She lifted it just enough to see him, then gave him a kiss. Thank you, Luffy. The trip there was deathly quiet. Not a ship, storm, or giant sea mammal in sight. It left for some contemplation on the part of the more human part of the crew. Why does Luffy need us anyway? He's a one-man army for crying out loud. Usopp yelled to the group that gathered in the kitchen. With Luffy on the figurehead and Nami navigating, they could all talk. Johnny and Yosaku were moral support. Well, I'm a top-rate chef. The beautiful young lady, that for some reason chose you, is good enough to keep you morons alive. Nami is an expert at whatever she puts her mind to. Sanji swooned, despite the fact that she was neither there or interested in his advances. I wonder if she'll put her mind towards pleasing Luffy. Zoro added to send Sanji into a depression. But that aside, we are all useful. I'm going to be the world's greatest swordsman. Jin took down those guys on Krieg's ship easily. Usopp is a damn good shot. Kaya has some medical knowledge. Nami could lie in the face of a nun. Don't forget I could kick your ass. Sanji yelled after he recovered from his depressed state, getting in Zoro's face. You couldn't kick my ass with cyborg legs, you shitty cook. Will you two shut up? You're acting like children, not pirates. Jin yelled, joining the fray. Stay out of this, lanky ball swinger. They yelled in unison. The momentary agreement didn't let them reconcile their differences, however. I'll hit you both so fucking hard you'd swear you kissed a train. Don't even think about it, long nose. They all yelled in unison as Usopp started to stand, making him sit back down after gulping hard. Everyone was silenced as Luffy opened the door to the kitchen. Come on guys, I get to meet Nami's mom. Luffy yelled in excitement before rushing away from the door and towards Nami. Isn't that supposed to be terrifying? The men yelled in unison as they followed him out. Luffy just smiled a bit at the sound of it. Shishishi. Why should I be scared? She sounds nice, and she's gotta be cute if Nami's hers. Luffy asked with a cocked head. He didn't really know what there was to be scared of. But everyone backed away when he called Belmir cute. Well, actually, she isn't my blood mother. Nojiko isn't my blood sister either. We're an adoptive family, Nami said, surprising them all that he didn't get his skull crushed under her fist. Well, you know what they say, blood is thicker than water. Luffy said with a smile, which earned him some stares. We're as close as any family, Luffy. Nami replied with some hostility. Huh, that's what I said. The blood of the Covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. But that's a mouthful, Luffy said to the confused crowd. He knew what family was. Ace and Sabo were his brothers as much as Garp was his grandpa. Did he just teach us something? Usopp asked, though was given no answer. No one wanted to think about that. Come on, I get to meet her family. Luffy yelled, snatching Nami up and leaping out to the ground. Luckily that small jump was nowhere near what that other jump was. After a short walk through the remains of one upturned town, they arrived at Nami's home. She had made sure to hide their presence from everyone. Arlong would sure investigate if a large group of strangers were spotted. Belmir, Nojiko, I'm back, and I brought friends. Nami yelled into the house. Surely at least one of them were inside. Sure enough, Belmir was. As sure as the sun would rise, the hearts of every man there sped up as she came down the stairs. She was quite a stunning woman to be in her 40s. Tall and well-figured, her unique red hair just screamed, women have guts. Nami, I'm so glad you're safe. Wait a moment, what's with the stitching? What did you do, young lady? Belmere had completely ignored the large crowd gathered in her home to focus on her daughter. And nothing, Mom. Just a, gunshot. But please don't worry about me. This is my boyfriend Luffy. That's, Nami was unable to fool her mother by changing the topic, however, though it wasn't ignored. What do you think you're doing going around getting shot? She asked as she hit her daughter upside the head, leaving a whelp. And you, how could you let her get shot? Belmere yelled as she hit the boy beside her daughter. Ow, Mom. He also took out Don Krieg and his crew for me. Nami groaned as she rubbed her head. It would hopefully prevent them from getting hit anymore. Really? Well, I'm so sorry, young man. Allow me to give you a very intimate reward. Belmere said as she pulled Luffy back up, leaning forward a little to show off her cleavage. It would undoubtedly freak the boy out and make him forgive the hit. Not even Luffy's blood manipulation could stop the blood that poured out of his nose. His jaw hung open at the mind-boggling offer. Nami's mother was a bigger pervert than he was. You've got the greatest mom ever, Nami. Luffy said before pulling her close to him, shocking Belmere and, well, everyone in the room. His face was planted square in the cleavage she had just been showing off. He had Kintama bigger than the balls on Jin's tonfa to do that. Ew. Luffy, I'm finding Nojiko, Nami yelled, storming out towards the Tangerine Grove. She could accept that he was going to get other girlfriends, but this was too much. Her mother may just be toying with him like she did every guy, but she didn't have to watch. Belmere was at a loss. She never expected him to actually agree to that offer. No one ever got past the embarrassment before. I thought. Her brain was stuck in glue. Shishishi. Would you like to be my second girlfriend? You're hotter than I expected. The word had morphed in her case. Calling Nami and her mother the same thing could get pretty weird. His mind really worked in mysterious ways. I'm confused. Did Nami tell you about me? Belmere reasoned the only way he could do this would be if he knew how she acted and planned ahead. That would be something Nami would come up with. Huh, oh no, I found out about you a couple hours ago. You're really muscled, but really soft too. Luffy couldn't act any other way as he held the woman. He didn't hear any complaints or anything, and it was comfortable. If he had eyes in the back of his head, he'd see the shocked expression of everyone in the room. Though if anyone in the village saw this, they'd look similar. Thank you. Her mind slowly started to work again, and she realized she should be angry. You're dating Nami, you little punk. She yelled as she went to hit him. She was greeted with quite the shock as her fist went right through his head without harming him, though her fist was left bloody, for a moment. Shishishi. So, the Pirate King has to have a lot of girlfriends. Luffy said as he absorbed the blood on her fist and smiled. Unaware of her past, or the fear that his defensive act would instill within a person, he caused her to back away. Pirate King, you're pirates, Nami. Belmere yelled out in anger and fear to her daughter. If she survived the thrashing she was about to give that girl, she'd have a lot of explaining to do. Why are you dating a pirate? Why did my fist go through him? Why does he want to make me his girlfriend? Why haven't you told him about your dear sweet mother before? The order was quite interesting, as it showed where her priorities lie. The fact that Nami took a blow to the head with every question may have distorted the answers she'd be given. I can explain. Nami groaned out as she rubbed her head. The world was spinning and fading out. Luffy, please explain. If her explanations angered her mother anymore, she may have her brain liquefied. Sure thing, Nami. She's cute. I'm a blood man. You're hot. She has a bad time talking about stuff. You never answered my question. Luffy blazed through those questions with short, simple answers that really brew more questions, though he asked his question first and had yet to receive an answer, so it seemed fair. What questie? Why would I date you? Belmere responded with her own question, though it wasn't enough. Not just for Luffy either. You should be saying no, not asking why. Nojiko and, amazingly, Nami yelled in unison at their mother, who effectively backed herself into that corner. Luckily she didn't have to respond to that. Huh, well, I'm really strong. We do lots of fun stuff. Some other stuff I can't say in polite company. Luffy said with a wink and a smile, making his crew fall down. The things he would say in polite company were terrible, so this must be some sick stuff. You are either the bravest or the dumbest boy I've ever met. Or maybe you're both. Either way, thank you for saving Nami. Belmir knew better than to do the normal routine again. This boy didn't know what a tease was. You're welcome. Haven't answered my question yet, shishishi. Luffy laughed as Belmir turned a shade of red and choked on her words. You're Nami's sister, right? Luffy asked as he turned to the blue-haired woman. Nojiko. Thanks for saving my sister. Don't even think about it. Nojiko said the two as one and left no wiggle room. It was bad enough her mom was blushing like a schoolgirl over the only man with a backbone since Genzo way back when. There was no way she'd be sucked into the show. Ah, okay. Nice to meet you. These are my friends and crew. Zoro, Usopp, Jin, and Sanji. The two other guys are Johnny and Yosaku, Zoro's friends. Are they okay? She asked as she walked over. They were all in a daze on the floor. The blonde one was mumbling Lucky Baster, or something. They're weird like that. Got any meat? I'm kinda hungry, Luffy said, ignoring the catatonic state of his friends. We have tangerines if you'd like. Our pride and joy, Nojiko said with a smile, walking out to the grove before she could get an answer. They were bound to love them. Sure enough, Luffy was amazed. Though that may have been because his diet was similar to that of a lion or a wolf. Any fruit would taste remarkable after all that meat. His friends got up around the time that Nojiko returned with an entire basket full. So, you guys really took down Don Krieg? Just the 7 of you? Belmir asked as she ate one of her tangerines. Years after retiring and settling down, she still had an interest in seeing pirates brought down. Don Krieg was a rather large fish of this sea, even compared to the literal fish Arlong. Peef. I wish. Zoro griped as he bit into his tangerine. This scrawny bastard threatened to poison us all if we didn't surrender, so we didn't even get to fight. Look, you don't have to remind me. We didn't even have the poison. Jin defended, ashamed of the tactic he used now that he was on a fair fighting crew. Wait, then how did you defeat Krieg? You were all captured by them. By him. This was starting to sound like a tale of heroism and clever escape. Not to mention the former member who was now with them. I was the first commander with Krieg's crew. After that fight, Luffy asked me to join because I didn't let his crew get hurt. But back to the taken hostage situation. Luffy wasn't. He had destroyed nearly 20 ships by the time that happened, which was almost all after he lost half to the line. Jin said rather somberly, those were his men he'd lost. Wait, he what? Belmir turned to Luffy, who had fallen asleep mid-feast and was snoring. That boy destroyed Don Krieg's fleet on his own. Maybe he was braver than he was stupid. Could explain why Nami would stay with him. Well, rather he's a boy is up for debate. The general consensus is he's not even human. Usopp put in his 2 cents on the matter. From what he remembered of the fight, Luffy wasn't human during most of it. His keen eyesight let him notice it a little better than others, but he still had no explanation. Nami still wanted him to meet me. I'm surprised she was that responsible, Belmir said as she looked out the window at her daughters. They were out in the grove, talking and picking some tangerines together. They sure did get along better than when they were young. Though a cat and a dog could do that at times. Nami didn't bring me here to meet you. Luffy yawned as he awoke from his nap. I'm here to kill that Arbong guy, Luffy said before starting to eat more of the tangerines left uneaten from his mid-meal nap. I take it back. Nami, get in here, Belmir yelled out to her daughter, who turned white and slowly marched in. What the hell do you think you're doing? We're not risking Arlong killing this entire village because you think this boy can take him on. Belmir whisper shouted, as if Arlong were right outside. I don't think he can, Mom. He can. Luffy's not just a normal person. Nami defended, arguing with her mother. Yeah, I'm a blood man, Luffy yelled out proudly, turning his hand to blood and back again. A blood man, the gears in her head once again clogged with gunk. That was only a rumor. One that would get you hanged if you spoke about it within the Marines. It was a crime to know about that fruit, let alone have it. You have Gold Roger's devil fruit. Chapter 8. Less than human. Everyone was frozen. No matter how isolated your island was, you'd have to be stuck on a ship in the middle of nowhere for 50 years to never hear of the legendary pirate King Gold Roger. Despite just how famous he was, details around him were a mystery. Though whatever he was, it was enough to name him the greatest pirate on the planet. Stronger than Whitebeard, Shiki, and the admirals themselves. A feat no other man had achieved. He was once the most powerful man on the planet, and this boy was a crime of existence to have the fruit. The reaction were jumbled but followed similar themes. Belmere and Nojiko were terrified, Belmere more so. Her years of experience as a marine left her headstrong, to take on anyone. But this wasn't anyone. Nojiko's fear was more what would happen now. Tyrannical rule under Arlong was bad, but what if he wanted to take over too? If he was anywhere near that level, they'd have no choice but to switch from one dictator to another. It was especially bad that the new was already hitting on her mother. Nami was shocked. She had been worried at first about how he could handle Arlong, but this meant he could handle just about anyone. Zoro was dumbfounded. Did Luffy really had that kind of power? He certainly had the ambition to be the king of the pirates. But to have the former king's devil fruit as well. The odds were really in his favor. Johnny and Yosaku could only thank the heavens that Luffy was a good guy. Hunting him would be a death sentence. Usopp was filled with an odd joy. He'd have to be a brave warrior like his dad if he was with Luffy. He'd have to be for him and Kaya. Kaya was in more confusion than anything. She had yet to be explained many important aspects of the pirate life, but she knew Gold Roger was the former king. So this had to be a big deal. Jin nearly dropped down to worship his captain. This explained why he took out Krieg so easily. He didn't stand a chance. Krieg could have, nay would have become the best. But it would be a long way away. This boosted Luffy leagues ahead of Krieg. Sanji wanted to kick Luffy off the face of the planet. Let him rule the moon, damn it. First he has the red-headed vixen that stole his heart with one look. Then he started hitting on her smoking hot punk-looking mother. Now he's the spiritual successor to the most powerful man in the world. What next? Was he the son of a celestial dragon? How could he even compete at this point? So cool. Do you know what this means? Luffy asked as he picked Belmere up. She had given him amazing news. I can kick anyone's ass. Not exactly the reaction one would expect from that news, but the follow-up was. With one big kiss planted squarely on the lips, Belmere was frozen solid in shock. Nami and Nojiko were gagging, Sanji was screaming, and everyone else was still frozen from the previous news. That's, wow. Belmere was left staring to the distance after the kiss. Her entire body was tingling. Though that may have been the work of a blood-manipulating boy with an inkling to have her be his girlfriend. She quickly realized what she said and turned a deep red before trying to talk her way out of it. I mean, that's such shocking news. That's why I said, wow. Shishishi. This is so awesome. But I'm so great, I could be the pirate king with any power. Luffy said confidently, puffing out his chest in a manly display. The fact that he was still holding Belmere in one arm did a good job adding to the look. This is no joking matter, young man. That power doesn't exist, period. It is off the books. All of them. It was deemed too powerful and dangerous for the public to know about. Belmere said, trying to calm down his joy. The fact that you're alive and have that power, means you're an enemy to the world government. They're that scared. Awesome. Luffy screamed with joy as he pulled her back into a full-on hug. The news that would typically terrify someone to the point of running from the world was something that brought Luffy great joy. Are you even human? Belmere asked with a yell as he squeezed her tightly. There was no way getting through his thick skull that this was a bad thing. No, not a chance, his crew stated automatically, making Luffy smirk. Monster, demon, devil, lucky bastard, they each came up with a nice name for it though, save a bitter Sanji. Hey, don't we have to kill that Arbong guy? Luffy asked his friend. It was great meeting Nami's family and all, but they didn't actually accomplish anything standing there talking. Everyone looked at each other a bit hesitantly. He was right. They still had to go take care of that massive fish-smelling thorn in their side. Nami hugged him. You're coming back. You're going to kill him. Belmere was still in Luffy's arm, though at least she was holding it together. But once Nami started to cry, she couldn't help it. They both hugged Luffy and started to cry onto him. We'll beat the snot out of you if you don't come back. We should go fight him though, so I can come back. Luffy said as he tried to lean away. 1 crying girl he could handle. 2 was scary. This was too much. You're right big bro Luffy. Let's kick his ass. That's the spirit. Luffy yelled as he set Belmir down and started walking towards the door. Nami, Kaya, you two help spread the word. Kokoyasi is about to be free from Arbong. Luffy yelled out as he started to run towards the giant dojo-looking place in the distance. No killing everyone on your own Luffy. I want a decent fight after that last ordeal. Zoro yelled in anger as he followed behind. He had been so damn bloodthirsty since he was cheated out of a fight at the Baratie. Let it go already, Jin yelled as he ran up beside Zoro. This was just getting old at this point. Fine, but no more stealing my fights. Zoro yelled in response at both Jin and Luffy. After a short run, which left Usopp panting like he ran a 5K, they arrived at their destination. A place that, for obvious reasons, was called Arlong Park. A tall building Luffy could only think of knocking down. Nami wanted him dead. Belmir wanted him dead. He ruined their lives. He made them cry. Arlong. Luffy yelled as he kicked the gate down. His eyes were red with blood and his heart was pumping fast. Which one of you is Arlong? That would be my name. You're interrupting my deal, human. A large saw shark fishman said from his little throne. The mention of the deal made them turn their attention to the man standing in front of him. A scrawny little marine with whiskers and rat ears on his hat. Not exactly the persona you'd embrace. Scram you kids, we're negotiating. I have business with Arlong. Very important business, Luffy said coldly as he started marching towards the two. It can wait scum. Nezumi, you know the deal. Confiscate it on the grounds that she's a thief, and it's yours. I'm letting her slip from my clutches. Of course Arlong, anything for money. The creep said with a smile as he started walking towards the exit. Johnny, Yosaku, deal with the rat, Luffy said before drawing back his fist and unleashing his fury on the still-seated Arlong. He put enough force behind that punch to shatter concrete or bone. But Arlong wasn't human, so using human bones to compare wasn't the best choice. You made my girlfriends cry. Wait what? Who do you think you are? You'll get us all. Nezumi was silenced by 2 swords held against his throat. The 2 experienced, though unlucky, bounty hunters were more than a match for the corrupt marine. No problem big bro Luffy. He won't take anything from big sis Nami. The fishmen stared in shock at the boy who just attacked their leader. Arlong was above all these lower life forms, how could one dare attack? You pitiful human pest, Arlong said as he climbed out of his wall. His nose was bent at a 90-degree angle, but he was able to bend it back. You need to learn your place on the food chain. He yelled as he rushed his attacker, ready to tear him to shreds. Which ones do you want, dartboard? Zoro asked as he tied his bandana around his head. The octopus was giving him an angry look. The meal that likes to dress up like a karate master, Sanji said as he lit his cigarette. Usopp, you and I can take weird-looking Lip 1, and his buddies. Jin said, eyeing the rather large group of fishmen that were actually here. Fear not, the great Usopp, will be providing supporting fire. From over here, Usopp said as he ran to the wall and climbed it, counting on the man-demon to act as a target dummy that hit things. Arlong started to swing at the boy. 1 punch could kill most of the humans if he was as mad as he was now, but it wouldn't work. The damn pest kept dodging. His swings weren't fast enough, so he'd need to be faster. Are you fighting with your nose? Usopp, you need to take notes. The nose is a powerful weapon. Luffy yelled as he moved out of the way of the attacks. Letting someone know you're invincible took the fun out of fights. Though luckily for Arlong he calmed down after that first punch. Luffy, normal people don't use their noses. How many people do you think do that? Usopp yelled in annoyance at his captain. Did he seriously think anyone besides Arlong would use their nose as a weapon? I don't know. At least someone else. Just a thought. ARRRG. Stop having a conversation when you should be dying. Shark on tooth. Arlong was infuriated. The boy storms in angry enough to take him on, then starts having a conversation. He'd devour his insides while he was alive. The cyclone of teeth shot at Luffy at incredible speeds. His preoccupation with his conversation took him off guard, and the razor-sharp teeth buried in his shoulder. "Face it, Roronoa Zoro. You're not match for Hachi, a master of the six-sword style," the octopus said as he swayed around and brandished his swords. "All were poor quality and overused. I am far beyond your skill, no matter how many swords you use," Zoro said as he put trusty Wado in his mouth. He may not have been able to fight last time, but he didn't have a scratch on him. "You'll never compare to my three-sword style. What? I have twice as many swords as you. You could never compete with me," Hachi yelled as he whirled his blades. "What is your fighting style, human?" the large, oddly elbowed fishman asked, waiting for the man to make a move or drop his guard. "I studied under Red Leg. I can kick your ass through concrete then make a good stew out of your corpse. You'll get to see that soon enough. I am a user of fishman karate, far superior to any human style. Let's see if you'll be a worthy fight. Stay focused, human," the fishman said before charging. "It takes two of you to fight me. What a compliment, but I think they can handle you," the big-lipped fishman said as he backed towards the waterway. "If the humans could use a sniper, so could they. Please, don't talk. Your face is so weird, and I need to focus on where I can hit these fish to cause the most pain," Jin said, staring down his opponents. "What the hell? Get off," Luffy said as he started to punch the shark. It hurt, but wasn't doing any damage. The real problem was he now had a shark attached via the shoulder. "See how you like it then," Luffy yelled before biting into Arlong himself. His ferocious bite broke his thick skin easier than most would expect, and he was rewarded with a mouthful of blood. Arlong finally pulled away. He never expected a human to bite him back. It altered the dynamic he had grown to believe. "Goo, human garbage taking a bite of me. How disgusting," he said to the human, who stood disturbingly still, staring in the distance. This is," Luffy licked his lips. The blood that filled his mouth was so delicious. Though what spilled out he had absorbed, which was working at maximum overdrive. "Delicious," Luffy said as he coated his eyes in blood and rushed towards the fishman. He needed more. "What the hell Arlong had another bite taken out of his shoulder. The first one was just a survival tactic, this was insanity. "Get off, disgusting human," he yelled as he went to punch the boy. Unfortunately, Luffy was in no rush to stop digging in, and turned his head to blood where he punched. Luffy finally pulled away and swallowed down the blood. He could give fishmen one compliment: they tasted great. "No wonder you're so angry, this isn't normal. This is high-octane crazy blood, filling me up. You're not a normal human. What the hell are you?" Arlong had heard of plenty of crazy things over the years. But that human turned into blood when he punched him. If that was one of those devil fruits, it would be a pain. "Hungry," Luffy yelled as he rushed him again, coating his fists in blood-clotted spikes. He couldn't think straight with the fishman's blood coursing through his veins. The taste of his blood in his mouth. He was going to get more blood. Preferably while he was alive, to keep it fresh. Every punch that landed on the bleeding fishman only added to the frenzy. Both fighters were getting more brutal. The only problem was that brutality wasn't affecting one of the fighters. Every hit left Luffy unharmed and angrier than before. Even when Arlong tried to sling him into the water, it never worked. He'd grab, go to sling, and nothing would go with the throw. It was infuriating. "What the hell does it take to kill one human?" he yelled out as he kept launching at the boy, trying to rip him apart. Nothing he did was working. He was still a human, damn it. "Shishishi. Who said I'm human?" Luffy asked with a smile as he dodged the attacks. That blood was kicking up his reflexes. Too bad he'd have to kill that guy. He'd be great as a blood bag. Arlong launched at him once again out of anger, but Luffy was ready. He reared back, kicked him as he got close, sending him catapulting towards a wall. He'd need to get better footwear than his sandals if he wanted to do that again. Something about kicking an incredibly hard skull didn't add up for his feet. Even if he could recover from his injuries, they still injured him. Hachi stood no chance against an uninjured Zoro. His abilities surpassed some swordsmen, but no one with the fierce determination of Zoro. He did, however, sustain a few cuts from his fierce style, not to be unexpected from a fight. "You're quite skilled," Zoro said as he sheathed his blades. Hachi fell to the ground in a pool of blood. He was injured, but alive. Luckily for him, two major things were keeping him alive: Zoro's honor among swordsmen, and Luffy's intense focus on the blood of the Saw Shark. If you practice, you could be a worthy opponent. Zoro walked over to the octopus and rolled him over. He pulled Watto out of his mouth and pointed it at the fallen swordsman. I expect you to get better, six-sword style Hachi. You're better than I expected, for a walking entree, Sanji said as slammed his foot into the fishman's side. He could feel at least one rib crack, which fit well with the injuries he had sustained. At least he didn't attack below the belt. He didn't need to say anything else to a worthy opponent. Your skills are noteworthy, human. The fish responded, panting from his injury. He had hit the blonde human many times, but he had been in fights with tougher enemies before by his mentioning of previous kicks. Fighting anymore would be suicide. He'd have to concede. If only the human had gotten distracted. We will win in the end. It's the natural order of things. He gripped his stomach and fell to the ground. The large-lipped fish was in a long-range contest with Usopp, who was still up on the wall. Unlike Usopp's various stars, the fishman had a seemingly limitless amount of ammunition. Sucking up water and shooting it at high velocities was just unfair. Luckily he had a few more tricks. Usopp Water Star, he yelled out as he fired the next shot. The fish merely smiled and opened his mouth, eating the star. Why would you think a water shot would work on me? Hot. Hot. The fishman started fanning his mouth. You have fallen for the deadliest of traps. Usopp Tabasco Star, feel the burn of my spicy tricks. Usopp yelled proudly. It was a very devious tool to use. Especially since the problem with Tabasco is, water only makes it burn worse. That was a dirty trick. The fishman yelled as he started to drink water, resulting in an even more intense burn. Nice move, Usopp. Now will you do something to actually injure the guy? Jin yelled in anger as he smashed another fishman to the ground. They were stronger than anyone he had faced before, but were still just grunts. Lots of grunts, however. Now he could face the big-lipped guy one-on-one, and he stood no chance. While the other fighters in the park had some level of respect for each other, the same could not be said for the Big Show. Arlong and Luffy were hardly speaking, charging each other and trading blows. Nothing Arlong could do worked. If he bit him, he bit back. He could never land a punch. Even after ripping out his teeth and using them as a weapon, the unspeakable happened. The boy used them on Arlong to tear into him even more. Finally Arlong had enough and smashed through his own building, searching for his Kiribaki. He was out of options, and out of his mind. His eyes matched Luffy's in color. If he had to tear down everything in the process, he would find a way to kill that filth. Luffy strolled through the hole with a smile. Not the typical, happy smile he normally had. He had a small smirk and blood dripping from his lips. His eyes were coated in blood and trained on Arlong's every move. He didn't want to simply rip the blood from him anymore. He was going to beat him down and tear him apart. Whatever it was in his blood, it was strong. The moment Arlong grabbed his weapon, Luffy leapt once more. His movements like a hungry animal attacking wounded prey. Whether or not Luffy was human was irrelevant. He was the predator. Arlong was his prey. Arlong was ready for him. He raised the weapon high and prepared to swing. The moment he was close, he brought it down and cleaved through the boy, splitting him down the middle. His moment of relief was squashed as the boy kept moving and uppercutted him in the jaw. Arlong was sent flying up his own building with 4 puncture wounds in the sensitive area reaching up to his tongue. Just as he hit the last ceiling, his eyes widened in fear. Luffy squatted down and rocketed up towards the fishman. Both arms were drawn back, fists clenched, ready to deliver a powerful blow. Chi-Chi Cannon, he yelled before slamming his fists in Arlong's stomach. The blow was powerful, devastatingly so, but not intended to launch him anywhere. He wanted him close. Arlong yelled in agony, 8 sharp points digging into his flesh, followed by 2 rocket-powered punches directly above the holes had torn at his insides. The tear in his flesh left his internal organs more susceptible to the concussive blows. Even with his enraged state, it was too much. The boy was fueled by anger and some inhuman bloodlust. He started to fall back down toward the room he had kept Nami in for so many years. Working tirelessly for his benefit. If he couldn't recover fast, it would all be for naught. Luffy roared out as Arlong fell. With a shoulder down he charged and knocked them both out of the top floor of building, crashing through some papers that were scattered on a desk. He put every ounce of rage in his body into forcing the fishman out with raw strength, and it worked. All eyes were on them as they crashed out of the building. Luffy used him as a living crash pad to soften his landing. The defeated fishmen and the recently gathered villagers stared in disbelief, while his crew only smiled. They never had a doubt their captain would win, though they didn't expect his victory celebration. Luffy had officially lost it. As soon as he landed he began to literally tear into the fallen foe. He gulped down large quantities of spilled blood hungrily. Arlong's aggressive nature was not just normal, it was biological. His blood was filled with so many different hormones he could hardly think. The adrenaline was overwhelming. The crowd was terrified at the display. Arlong was a brutal savage who'd kill people as quick as look at them, but their hero was currently eating him, alive by the look of his breathing. If the boy was half as brutal outside of battle as he was inside, they'd be in even worse shape than before. No one spoke up as Luffy indulged himself. He pulled the blood straight into his mouth, ignoring the crowd of terrified people. His friends wouldn't even move at risk of looking like another target to the blood-crazed maniac. Nezumi was on the verge of vomiting. Arlong lacked any sense of empathy, but he would kill you quickly. He'd also never do this. If there was any divine entity above or below, let them make sure this boy could be negotiated with after he ruled this pitiful island. Luffy finally stood from the disemboweled body of the fishman. He wiped his mouth off and breathed heavily, scanning for anyone he could fight. No fishman was standing, but there was a marine being held hostage for him to deal with. Rat guy, Luffy growled as he walked towards him. Johnny and Yosaku promptly backed away quickly, leaving Nezumi to crawl backwards in fear. We can obviously work out a deal. Same as with Arlong. Better than Arlong. You can even keep that girl Nami's Mon-e. Nezumi screeched in fear as a blood shard shot at his stomach, piercing in like a knife. You were going to steal from her. Luffy yelled as he launched another. He had no interest in watching this one die. Leave, he yelled, coming down from his rage high. Luckily the ingestion of the blood was much more fleeting than the absorption into his blood. Otherwise, he'd have ripped him apart, starting with those whiskers. Nezumi gripped his stomach and ran as best as he was able. No amount of greed would make him risk angering that demon. He'd run to his ship, set sail, and make his report on that monster. They'd need to know about this quickly. Luffy turned to face the crowd, who were shaking with fear. They had received the news that someone was fighting Arlong, and had to see it for themselves. This was awful. 3 people ran from the crowd with big smiles on their faces however. You did it, Luffy. That was amazing. Great job. The 3 women yelled as they rushed the boy, who hurried to wipe the blood from his mouth and swallow any still left. Nami reached him first and gave him a large hug, burying her head in his shoulder. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't think he would ever be stopped. After a kiss she backed away, letting her sister swoop in to hug him. Thank you, Luffy. You really are as amazing as she told us. Nojiko said with a smile as she backed away. Her mother was about to burst. Burst she did, metaphorically. Arlong had made her life hell. Killing Genzo all those years ago had made her harbor immense hatred for the fish. Her daughter had to work for the man to keep them alive. It was terrible. She had dreamed of killing him herself, but it wasn't possible. If she tried, her family would be killed. So she'd been silent for years. Then came this boy, a pirate with a heart of gold, or at least close to it for a pirate. She lifted him up in a hug and gave him a big kiss, taking the breath right out of the surprised boy. After the long, oh so long kiss, she tore away from him and smiled, before hitting him upside the head. That was the bravest, dumbest, most brutal act of revenge I've ever seen. Luffy was in a state of shock. He hardly noticed the lump on the side of his head as he stared back at the older woman. She hit like an angry giant, but he couldn't feel it. He was lost in a swarm of thoughts, feelings, and rushing hormones that weren't murderous. She kept talking while he was lost in thought, but he caught the important bit at the end of it. The only way I can possibly repay you is with my body. She said in his ear, though it was loud enough for everyone to hear. So consider me your new girlfriend. Luffy fell back in a state of paralysis. His mind couldn't function anymore. Blood shot from his nose at rates that could put out a fire, and he was smiling wider than any of them had ever seen a human smile. I think I need a drink, a lot of drinks, Nami said as she walked towards the town. It would take most of the booze on the island to calm her down from the fact that she was sharing her first boyfriend with her mother, but she had been preparing for it since they met each other. That's why it would only take half the island's liquor. You know Nami's not going to be happy. But at least you can keep an eye on her this way, Nojiko said, trying to pick out the positive from the situation. It was still a little weird that she may one day call him dad, so many things were wrong with that. I can't help it, dear. He did just save our lives. It's the least I can do. Belmir cooed as she walked with the only daughter that would speak with her right now. Nami would certainly get over it, at least over time. Good job, Captain. You're my hero. Arrow Cook won't be able to function right anymore, Zoro said with a smile. This was absolute gold. He had ammunition that could take him down forever after that. I can't believe it, Luffy. You just shortened your lifespan. Nami's going to kill you. Usopp yelled at his downed captain. How could he expect this to work? We'll need a trained doctor quickly if he wants to stand a chance, Kaya commented as she pulled on Usopp's arm, dragging him away. You really don't fail to impress, Captain, Jin said as he walked past, eager to get some alcohol before Nami consumed it all. Sanji didn't say a word. He stared with fury and jealousy at his captain. He was the luckiest damn man on the planet. Shitty motherfucker, damn it. He realized the accuracy of his insult and cursed himself. Heading in search of a woman before Luffy could get them. After a few minutes of bleeding and reabsorbing the blood, Luffy snapped out of his shock. With a quick pinch to check if he was in fact awake, he jumped up and ran off towards the village. Wait, I wasn't dreaming, right? He yelled as he charged towards the town, leaving the structural unsound Arlong Park to crumble unceremoniously. A fitting end as he lay lifeless in front of the rubble. Luffy was bouncing madly around the village, searching for his newfound girlfriend. She had to be somewhere, but there were so many people. After asking most everyone in town, he got some information, and immediately ran towards where she was. I'm sorry, Genzo, Belmir said as she knelt in front of the grave. His pinwheel spun quickly in the wind. I couldn't do it myself like I said I would. I let someone else solve my problems. But he's a good man. I think you'd like him. Though you'd pull your old hard-ass routine on him. Belmir smiled a little at the memories. She could always make him shed his hard exterior with a little flirt. Too easy. He'll take good care of us. Won't you? She asked as she heard the footsteps. He wasn't trying to be subtle in the slightest. Huh, oh me, thought you were talking to the dead guy, Luffy said as he walked slowly towards her, putting an arm on her shoulder. Of course I'll take care of you guys. I don't want anything to happen to my friends, or my girlfriends. You are my girlfriend, right? Luffy asked with obvious worry, afraid he dreamed the moment. You're damn right I am, she said with a smile, pulling him down to her. She surely wasn't going to act embarrassed any longer. This dead guy is Genzo. We were friends, years ago, Belmir said, squeezing him a bit tighter into the hug. Luffy wheezed in her hold. Being retired certainly didn't make her soft. Well, weak. Weak would be the good word for his position. Nami told me about him. He sounded like a good guy, saving you all like that. Yeah, Arlong came to collect, found Nami and Nojiko. Genzo told him the payment he made was for them. My payment for me, so Arlong executed him. I never got to thank him. You didn't need to, did you? I mean, you don't give up your life for a thank you. Luffy said, finally able to breathe from her death grip of a hug. Well, that doesn't mean I don't want to thank him. He saved my family, Belmir said, trying to argue with his logic. Well, they're all alive. There's your thank you. Come on, I want to show you our ship, Luffy said as he helped her up and led her towards the docks. One quick run later, they arrived. Luffy leapt up and brought Belmir with him. He showed her around the ship, ending the tour precisely where he knew he would, the master bedroom. This is where we'll sleep. Cool, huh? Luffy said with a smile as she stared. The room was bigger than any other aboard, and the massive bed took up a lot of the space. It was obvious where he believed he'd spend a lot of time on the ship. He leapt to it in a single bound, patting the spot by him. Come on, it's comfy. Luffy smirked at her. Yeah, I understand. Can you answer a question? Luffy asked, rolling to look at her. Sure, go ahead. Can we do that again? He asked with a big smile. Sure, maybe tomorrow we can. She ended her sentence as she felt something poke her in the side. Teenage boy plus total control of your blood. She may be too old for this. Chapter 9. Blood boils. Luffy yawned as the morning sun crept in his dark enclosure. A typical night's sleep for the straw-hatted young man was 3 hours in a catatonic state. The only alteration from that was that he had gone into the wee hours of the morning with his most recently acquired girlfriend rather than thinking of how great it would be when he was Pirate King. Belmere, like any normal person, liked to get her 8 hours into function at full capacity. With her newly acquired boyfriend, however, this was likely gone forever. The boy was, in a word, insatiable. Like someone who never had sugar tasting it for the first time, he wanted more, and more, and more. That would actually be a good comparison, given she was initially full of energy but was now exhausted. She also couldn't feel her legs, making it all the more like having too much sugar. Hey, Belle, get up. Luffy yelled as he jumped up from the bed, searching for his shed attire. He didn't see a particular problem facing the world buck naked, but he didn't want Usopp getting upset should Kaya catch an eyeful. Belmere groaned at the sound of his yell. Typically she had to awake early to tend the tangerines, but this was hell. She just wanted a water to rehydrate, about 20 years of her youth back so she could actually compete with the monster of a man, and to sleep in just a while longer. Though only one of these things was possible at the moment, and it was only because the glass she fetched went unused upon her return to the room. 5 more minutes, honey, she said as she pulled a pillow over her head, content with being lazy just once. Come on, you haven't told me about that Pirate King thing, he yelled as hopped back on the bed, shaking her lightly. The fight with Arlong, followed by the addition of her, then the subsequent loss of his virginity, made him forget all about it. Now she could finally explain how he shared the power of the most famous pirate in known history. Fine, but I'm not getting out of bed, Belmere said as she pushed herself up to a sitting position. I don't know all that much honestly. Roger was rumored to be a one-man army who'd take on anyone with a smile. He was fearless, which made him feared. I still don't know how we caught him, or more importantly now how you ended up with his devil fruit, she said as she looked at the boy, now her lover. What had it been, 20 years? Did the world government not confiscate the fruit? Was it stolen? That doesn't tell me anything. Luffy huffed as he crossed his arms. Oh well, I think I can use it just fine on my own anyway. He smiled a bit as he started to leave the room, opting to let her rest. He'd definitely need to do that again. Was it older women, marine women, or just all women that could do that thing with their tongue? Something he'd have to find out. For now he needed to worry about finding everyone. The first thing he did was check who made it back to the ship. Kaya was in the small non-Luffy's woman quarters and Usopp in the men's, which left Jin, Nami, Sanji, and Zoro to be found throughout the town. It was like a scavenger hunt with drunks and a pervert. The first one that Luffy found, unsurprisingly, was Zoro. He was at the biggest bar in town, passed out on the counter after what was obviously a rowdy night of drinking and at least one brawl, in which he emerged the victor unquestionably. Luffy drug him out by the collar, which woke him up shortly after. Damn it Luffy, I think they had more liquor. He groaned as he pushed himself up to his feet, rubbing his head. Thankfully with Nami as competition he decided to drink just one place dry as a desert kingdom, lest he get in a drinking contest with a woman getting over the fact that her boyfriend is dating her mother. It was still nothing but joy to Zoro. Well too bad, we can't just stay here, Zoro. Adventure, he yelled out as he started to run to the next bar. Surely they'd find Jin or Nami there. Luckily for him, he did. Nami had awoken from her blackout and was helping herself to the top-shelf sake and whiskey when the two barged in. Nami, come on, we need to go. Fine, just let me get a few bottles to go, Nami said as she started to fill her arms with the bottles of premium hooch. This was the closest she had to a therapist and would probably be the best one she could get. To hell with her liver. Luffy escorted his two friends back to the ship. Zoro couldn't find his way back with a compass and a map, so having a drunk navigator to guide him was kind of redundant. Luffy was gifted with praise from everyone he passed who was somehow conscious from the partying. He greeted them with rushed smiles as he tried to keep Nami walking a straight enough line towards the ship. When they returned, they were greeted with a nice surprise. Jin and Sanji were standing on the edge of the ship smiling down at them. "Nami Swan, I got you a gift," Sanji yelled as she approached. Few forces on the planet could stop Sanji from hitting on a woman in his own special way. Luckily Luffy wasn't too worried about whatever gift he may have gotten her. "Hey, you made me help too, you bastard," Jin yelled in anger at Sanji, who was leaving him out in mentioning just how he had acquired the gift. "We dug up your savings and brought them aboard," he yelled, taking the joy of the reveal away from Sanji as payback. "That's so nice of you guys," Nami yelled out in a drunken haze. With enough alcohol in her blood to kill a charging elephant sword, she didn't even know who she was thanking. "Oh Nami Swan, I knew you'd like it. How about a kiss?" Sanji asked as he swooned his way towards her. Through closed eyes and his own kissing noises, he could hear something. The snickering of a green-haired swordsman. He opened his eyes and saw Luffy between him and his beloved Nami, and it was at this moment he knew, he fucked up. "No kissing my girlfriends," Luffy yelled as he floored the blonde cook with a single punch downward, embedding his face in the deck and sending Zoro flying backwards. It was in a storm of laughter, but he was still a casualty. After a quick patch-up from Kaya, Sanji was up and nowhere near at them, lest his next kiss be the floor once more. He'd need to get a hold of a woman before Luffy could get his bloody paws on them if he ever wanted to have a woman. Luffy helped Nami to the master room and laid her into the bed. She'd need to sleep off that drunken stupor before she was any real use. Luckily Belmere knew some basic navigation from her time with the Navy. Just another perk of having her join. As they were about to sail, however, another member of the family ran towards the dock. "Wait, Mom, Luffy, Nami," Nojiko yelled as she charged towards their ship, carrying a large duffel bag she could hardly hold up. Everyone on the ship looked out at her, wondering one thing that didn't really get wrapped up yesterday. "Will she join too?" "Here," she said as she slung the duffel bag up and onto the ship. "You forgot these in your rush, Mom," she yelled out before putting a hand on her hip, staring up at her mother, who was still clutching the railing. "You really are more mature than me sometimes," Belmere said as she opened it up. Some clothes, old pictures, and most importantly for their survival, her sword and rifle. "Hey, why don't you join us? It's lots of fun being a pirate," Luffy yelled happily from his spot by Belmere, who was rummaging through her bag of things. "No thanks, a pirate's life isn't for me. But swing by when you're Pirate King, I may like dating the most powerful man in the world," Nojiko said before sticking her tongue out and turning away, leaving everyone to sweat drop and fall. "No fair," he yelled, feeling his gut clench at how close he was to having a new girlfriend. "Well, I'm coming back. I'm going to be king of the pirates," he yelled triumphantly, practically claiming her for the future. Though of course, that was her plan in the first place. Luffy begrudgingly sat on the figurehead as they left. It gave him time to reflect and think. He liked to do this after a fight. It gave him an opportunity to come up with cool new names for his attacks. That biting thing Arlong did was cool but pretty impractical. Hopefully, he could chameleon the move of someone cool. His thoughts were interrupting by the yell of surprise from Belmere. "Luffy, come check out your bounty," Belmere yelled as she looked at the paper Nojiko had stuffed in the bag along with her things. Apparently, Rat Guy got to report rather quickly, or Luffy really was a monster before she joined him. "Oh cool, I got a whole page and everything," he said as he snatched the page. "Wanted dead or alive, Monkey D. Luffy. Reward." Luffy started to grin widely before turning it around. 60 million belly, he yelled out to his crew, who stared at it in disbelief. "Yeah, apparently, I'm a major menace who slaughters his enemies. Hey, that's not fair. I left that stupid clown guy alive. Maybe, and, fat lady. A real saint, Captain," Jin commented with a smirk. His new captain not only outranked everyone in East Blue, he blew them out of the water. He did so with brutal efficiency as well. Well, I got a bounty for joining you too, 15 million. Looks like they aren't too happy with Marines turning to the life of piracy. Belmere commented as she looked at her bounty. We can look at these all later, someone's heading straight for us. Luffy said as he looked past them at a single-person ship floating almost lazily towards them. Luffy waited for it to get a bit closer before he yelled out at him. Hey, why are you in that floating chair? Luffy yelled, ignoring the large crucifix mast and coffin-like features. The strange man stood and looked up at the ship, seemingly sizing it up. Everyone looked back at him as well, questioning his intent. All but the second demon on the ship, who was shaking behind them all. I am looking for the one known as Luffy. The man said loudly with heavy authority. That's me, Luffy yelled out, hopping up on the railing. You wanna join my crew? He asked, making the man do something it was obvious he hadn't done in a while, smile. I believe I will pass. You were the one who took out the remainder of the Krieg pirates. The stranger asked, stepping up from his chair and walking to the edge. The boy certainly had the gall of someone who'd take on a few thousand people. But was it a facade? Most of those guys, yeah. Why are you looking for me then? Luffy asked, sitting on the railing and letting his legs dangle. If someone didn't want to join his crew, why would they even look for him? I was using them to alleviate my boredom, so I believe that burden now falls on you. The man said as he reached for the large blade on his back, gripping the handle and eyeing down the ship. Jin swallowed his shock to yell out in fear. That's him. That's the monster. He yelled frantically as he saw the man grab his blade. Hawkeye Mihawk, a name picked up from a whisper of a rumor. The only swordsman with the kind of power to take out a ship with a single slice. Zoro smiled at the name. To think, he'd been itching for a real fight. This was it, his opportunity. He approached Luffy and put a hand to his shoulder. Captain, do not interfere, no matter what, Zoro said, causing Mihawk and Luffy to end their staring contest for a moment. This is my dream. With that, Zoro turned to Mihawk. I will give you your fight, Dracula Mihawk. Mihawk smirked and jumped up to the deck of the ship he was ready to cleave in two. Typically young and stupid kids like him would challenge him, thinking it would be easy. This one at least knew he may die, and didn't want to be saved from his death. This could indeed be interesting. But no matter, he was still a minuscule threat. Mihawk pulled his pocket knife from its decorative scabbard and took his stance. Let us begin, swordsman. Zoro bit down on Watto hard enough to make a dentist cringe. He was going to defeat Mihawk and he wouldn't even acknowledge his skill enough to use a real sword. He'd show him the error of his ways. Luffy balled his fists as the two started their fight. Everyone else hid behind something in case the fight moved, but he knew it unnecessary for himself. The moment the fight was over, he'd be right on them. That's all the promise included. Mihawk hardly changed facial expressions as he expertly deflected the blows. After years of training and sword fighting, this was child's play. But he did show potential. Somewhere beneath the roaring flurry of slices was real talent and technique, as well as a drive he hadn't seen in years. Whatever reason this child had to challenge him, it was what he based his life on. You're sloppy, swordsman. Have you ever been in a real duel? He questioned genuinely, though he knew it would sound like an insult. Erg, I've fought the best in this sea, you bastard. Zoro yelled, losing his composure to guilt and rage. Two grave enemies to a swordsman. No matter how hard he tried to land a hit, however, it didn't work. A flick of the wrist and he may as well have kept his hand steady. Mihawk almost yawned in his face during his attack. It was pathetically weak, but at least he wouldn't give him an inch to counter. Quite the feat. You say that as if I should be impressed. He commented, making his opponent angrier and sloppier, leaving him an opening. You're much too wild to fight me, he stated as he went on the offensive, forcing Zoro to use all three swords to defend himself. Why do you fight, swordsman? Because if I don't fight you now, I may never get the chance again. He yelled from his defensive stance, fiery as ever. He wouldn't back down because he was losing. He'd never. Mihawk had done it. He slipped through the defenses and punctured through his chest, easing right between his ribs. You may not get that chance again anyway. Mihawk stared into the eyes of his opponent. There was a knife less than an inch from his heart, and he wouldn't even blink. Do you fear death, swordsman. Dying was never a part of my plan. But I take no shame in dying while fighting you, Zoro said, swallowing his pride. He wanted to be the greatest swordsman on the planet, but if he lost to him, that was as far as he was meant to go. If that is the case, you will not die by this blade, Mihawk said calmly before sheathing his pocket knife and unleashing Yuru, his black blade. You will die from the most powerful sword you shall ever see. Zoro sheathed his swords, tossing the nameless ones overboard for being too weak. If he survived this and was able to fight Mihawk again, he could only have the best blades. He gripped Wado, presumably for the last time, and extended his arms. How kind of you, but I seek no pity. I have pity for no man. This is a matter of respect. State your name, swordsman, Mihawk said as he gripped Yuru, eyeing his form. If he truly was a man who would vie for his title, he could survive a simple slash. I am Roronoa Zoro, and I will become the world's greatest swordsman, Zoro said, sending his gaze straight to the greatest. Mihawk smiled. Even when he knew he would die, he wouldn't give an inch. I will remember your name, Roronoa Zoro. With that said, he brought down the blade. A diagonal slice across his chest that would kill any normal man. He could feel the tip of the blade cut across Zoro's rib cage, digging into each bone and marking him for life. He watched the blood shoot out of the wound and began to sheathe Yuru, or at least, he tried. Luffy's eyes were red with blood. His first friend had just been split open like a freshly hunted animal. It wasn't even a fight. It was two quick moves that left Zoro on the ground, possibly dead. You bastard. But that didn't matter. The fight was over, and so was his promise. He formed his blood blade as he ran towards the attacker. He may have overwhelming skill, but that doesn't matter if you can't move. Mihawk stared at the boy with a faceless expression. No matter how much he tried to move, he couldn't budge. It was as if he was locked in place. Fear was an emotion that died out too long ago for him to know how it felt anymore, but this was exciting. He may very well be killed by someone in the East Blue, weakest of the seas. Luffy, Zoro yelled as his captain came close to Mihawk, stopping him in his tracks. The pain was intense. Every breath tore at the wound and pushed on the cuts to his bones. You can't kill him, Zoro said slowly, pacing himself. If he spoke too much in one turn, he may very well pass out. He's my goal. I will not let you fight him for me. I will not lose another fight until I have claimed his title. Luffy stared at Zoro, then back at Mihawk. He absorbed the blood blade back into his body and stood still, focusing now on Mihawk. That was what Zoro wanted. To defeat him and become the greatest. He couldn't take that from him, no matter how much he wanted to. Mihawk finally felt his body return to his control. Whatever this boy was, he was certainly more frightening than the real swordsman. Shanks was right about him. Skill doesn't matter in a fight with him. I'll be keeping an eye on you as well, Monkey D. Luffy, you seem interesting. With that, Mihawk hopped down back to his floating coffin, leaving them to pick up the pieces of his nice little visit. I will face you again, Roronoa Zoro. Surpass this blade and claim your title. Shortly after, Zoro was sprawled across the kitchen table and having his wounds dressed. Sake for disinfectant and an old needle to do the sewing, not the most pristine conditions. When you throw away the life of a bounty hunter to become a pirate, you give up most luxuries. Such as a soft bed, admiration, a good bounty. Though with that said, Luffy was sleeping in an exceptionally large bed with 2 women and 100 million belly in his metaphorical pocket. Maybe it was just his luck. Jin was experiencing the heaviest impact of the interaction however. He could hardly speak, wouldn't look anyone in the eye, was afflicted with terrible shakes. He had seen the monster that wiped out half his old crew fight with a member of his new crew with overwhelming higher skill. That was the grand line that they'd be going to. If that wasn't enough, his new captain was the devil that took out the other half of his crew, and had come close to eviscerating the monster swordsman. He was one talking animal away from having a damn meltdown. Luffy was taking it all a bit differently. He was enraged by the brazenness of that Hawk guy, hopping up to his ship and threatening his crew, nearly killing Zoro. It was enough to enrage any captain. But there was nothing he could do. Mihawk was Zoro's fight, whether he'd win or not. The only thing he could do now was sulk on the figurehead and stare at the land they were approaching. This was a terrible situation. With Nami out of commission for the next few hours, Belmir was in charge of navigation. Despite years of seafaring, she wasn't as skilled as her naturally talented daughter, so they were going at a slower pace than normal. Her experience did keep her out of the calm belt, however, but that meant they could only plausibly head to one place. Logatown. She hadn't been there in ages. Land ho! She yelled out with little enthusiasm. The mood of the ship was down since the swordsman had been injured, and even she was affected. Some time later, they docked. There was surprisingly little presence near the port. Maybe it was because of the approaching storm, but whatever it was good for them. They could get some much-needed supplies and some new equipment. Belmir would need to get her sword sharpened and her rifle checked. They had been buried for years since Arlong came along and needed some desperate care. Jin thankfully didn't need anything himself. His tonfas were his main weapon and perfect for fighting. Though Zoro may need some company after his injury. Sanji wanted to get some food for them all. Supplying the ever-growing crew was going to get pricey, but luckily the beautiful Nami had funds for them all. Kaya would be getting some medical textbooks and supplies, lest another full-body slash befall one of them. If Nami awoke anytime soon, she could get the new clothes she had talked about. Luffy would undoubtedly go to one place and one place alone, Gold Roger's execution platform. We'll meet up here in a few hours, got it? Belmir stated to them all, getting their looks of annoyance. Itineraries were no one's favorite, but they would definitely need it to stay on track. Yes, ma'am, they all said in monotonous unison, kicking the ground beneath their feet. It was like going on a field trip with an overbearing mother. Though most of the crew didn't know that feeling, either not knowing, having, or caring about their parents. Jin and Zoro headed for the nearest weapon shop. Belmir was almost as stingy with the money as Nami, but at least she wasn't charging him. She believed in a well-equipped soldier and couldn't expect him to pay back the resupply. Outside he noticed a woman fighting some brute, but brushed past it when she easily defeated him. It was impressive, but he needed to focus on getting new swords. He limped around the shop looking at the swords. The wound was still fresh and despite his amazing strength, he couldn't rebound that quickly. The woman walked into the shop clumsily, falling square into the injured swordsman and opening up a few stitches. The swallowed yell filled her ears and she scrambled to her feet. "I am so sorry," she yelled as she reached to pull the green-haired man up. She didn't think it was that bad when she fell onto him, but then she saw the large wound that she undoubtedly reopened for him. It was paramount to an assault on a civilian out of pure clumsiness. Zoro was about to yell at her or threaten her life, but he couldn't muster a word. The woman looked identical to the last person he ever expected to see. A long-dead rival that stood as the foundation for his world. "K. Kuina," he groaned as he stood, grasping the wound. "And no, I'm Tashigi, Master Chief Petty Officer Tashigi," she yelled, falling into a stiff-backed stance in front of the injured man. Stating her rank was second nature, and would possibly help smooth things over. Though of course, it may not go over well if he reported her to Captain Smoker. Jin froze at the mention of her rank. A marine quite literally just stumbled onto them and injured Zoro. This was not good, especially if she saw the wanted posters for them all. "Good for you," Zoro said, averting his gaze and looking in the discount sword barrel. He'd start with the cheap ones and look at the better ones after that. With any luck, he could find at least one good sword in this bin and have more money for another one. He didn't much care for the fact that she was in the Marines. He and Jin were more than a match for them, even injured. Zoro grabbed up one of the swords he could hear calling his name. Maybe it was blood loss, but it was speaking to him. "Let me make it up to you." That's, let me look it up. She could tell by the appearance that it was some named sword from her book. Why it would be in that bin confused her, but those mistakes tend to happen. "I can't allow you to buy that sword," the shopkeeper yelled as Zoro placed it on the counter. "It shouldn't even be in that bin, it's cursed." "It is that sword then. Sandai Kidetsu. It curses all of its owners with what are you doing?" Zoro wordlessly drew the blade and looked at the two naysayers. He was too tired to deal with curses or any other nonsense. If he wasn't lucky enough to tame a curse, Mihawk would have killed him in the fight. "If this sword deems me unworthy, let it kill me now." He dragged the blade across his stitches, eyes closed. He wasn't giving it permission to cut, so it wouldn't dare. After he completed the trial, he cut into the wooden counter, slicing it like butter. "It likes me," Zoro said with a smirk, looking at the two who stared at him. "That was the dumbest thing I have seen in my lifetime," the shopkeeper said, staring in awe at the bravery and stupidity of the young man. He couldn't believe the most bloodthirsty sword in his shop wouldn't shed a drop of his. Maybe it really did like him. "You're insane," Tashigi yelled, looking at him and the sword. By all accounts, he should be bleeding out on the floor. Why did he try something so risky? Who was this green-haired swordsman? Luffy whistled to himself as he explored the town. He wasn't too interested in any of the shops. He liked his vest, didn't use any weapons, going to get food would end poorly. The one spot that he wanted to see, however, was crowded by so many people he could hardly get through. He could hear yelling about some execution. Whoever it was really annoying. He wanted to get a look at the stand, damn it. This better be good. At least he could get some blood. Here we have two pirate captains that have formed an alliance. This behavior is dangerous and deplorable. We cannot let this go lightly. Let it be known, any and all pirates trying to operate in my jurisdiction will be executed. A muscular white-haired man was yelling from the execution platform. Luffy immediately knew he must be the captain in charge of this island. At least both of the people scheduled for execution were adults. They even looked familiar. Captain Buggy of the Buggy Pirates. Captain Alvida of the Alvida Pirates. You two have been deemed a danger to the ordinary citizens of the sea. Operating in unison is unforgivable, and as such you are to be executed. Smoker hated using the old platform. As much as he hated piracy, this was a special spot in history. To think, just because these two had formed an alliance, they got to be executed on the famous platform. Neither could or would speak. Their unique powers meant both would need to be placed in seastone cuffs. It left them sick and weak. Buggy got to experience it a few times in his time with the power, while Alvida was new to the feeling. It was definitely the worst feeling she had felt. Luffy moved through the crowd towards the platform. He knew the clown guy Buggy, who he had already forgiven for the previous encounter. No one really got hurt, and he did get his ass thoroughly kicked, so there was no grudge to hold. Whoever the woman was though, she was pretty hot. Oh wait, no, Belmere was hot, and Nami was pretty. So she'd have to be cute. Cute would work. Maybe she'd like to be his girlfriend. It would be a moot point if she was executed though. You were the worst ally I've ever had. Alvida muttered out finally, staring out of the crowd. All she wanted was to find that straw-hatted boy and claim him as her own. Of course, after finding this damn clown and believing a word he said, they got caught by the only person in the sea that had a weapon that could hurt her. This is all your fault. My plan would have worked perfectly if you listened. Buggy spat back, still with enough will to fight her if not the Marines. Quite an ironic ending for someone immune to sword attacks, being decapitated. Same spot as Roger himself too. How terrible. Smoker stepped back and let the executioners take their place. The rickety old structure surely couldn't hold much anymore, but it did serve to show examples to the town. Normally they'd get last words, but that bickering would serve. Luffy began climbing the platform in his blood form. Moving up is a climbing stream. The shocking thing was no one noticed till he got right to the top, where everyone was staring. The shocked screams did little to warn the Marines who were prepared to decapitate the pirates, however, as they were expecting as much. Luffy punched the two that were behind the woman first, then the ones behind Buggy. He was able to snatch the keys before they fell down to the crowd, who thankfully broke their falls. He felt weak as he started to unlock them, but it subsided after they were released. Buggy stared in shock at his rescuer. He sooner expected red hair than that damn straw hat. What the hell are you do? Before he could finish his sentence, Luffy gave him hard shove off of the platform. That was certainly not the tone you use when talking to your savior, and Luffy was in no mood to hear it. Alvida looked at the sailing Buggy, then at the raven-haired savior. She could feel in her stomach that she really didn't need to follow in his footsteps. My hero, she yelled, giving him a large hug. It would keep her from being thrown off the platform at very least to do some sucking up, as much as she hated it. Shishishi. No problem. Who are you, anyway? Luffy asked, ignoring the encroaching Marines. "You don't remember me. That hurts," Alvida said, pouting her lips. "It's me, Alvida. Really, I thought that guy was blind or something. You got really thin. And cute," Luffy yelled, looking her over. He didn't know what deity to thank for the transformation, but they were good. Before she was so fat she probably didn't know what her feet looked like. Now, hubba bubba. No, wait, that was a gum. No time to think. "Well, thank you, but we have some bigger things to worry about than my waistline," she said as she looked out at the plaza. The civilians all ran away once they were freed, and now Marines were moving in. With her crew gone and herself disarmed, this boy would have to be one hell of a fighter. "Well, it's not the biggest thing to worry about anymore," Luffy snickered, making her stare at him in anger. The death stare sent a familiar chill up his spine. Was every girl he tried to date going to be so scary? That would have to be something to be scared of later, as right now they were surrounded. Surrender pirates. Some poor faceless fodder Marine with no chance of fighting those two one-on-one. But as was the way with Marines, overwhelming numbers were the main weapon. None of them were privy to his power, however, so they did not know that tactic was destined to fail. "Damn it, Luffy." Distant screams could be heard from the fringes of the Marines. "We don't babysit you for 10 minutes and you start up a damn riot." Jin and Sanji were yelling at him, taking out the preoccupied Marines with ease. Zoro was rather far behind, unable to run like his fellow crewmates. "Hey, guys," Luffy yelled, waving at his crew. "This is Alvida. She's going to join us and be my new girlfriend," Luffy declared, making up his mind for them both. Sanji fell over in pain from the emotional blow. What would he have to do, damn it? Be kidnapped by beautiful women? "We never discussed that," Alvida yelled in shock and anger. How dare he, not recognizing her, insulting her former self, and now he had decided on his own she was his girlfriend. She was right about him, he was perfect for her. "So?" Luffy asked, cocking his head. He noticed the Marines were now focusing on his friends and pointed it out. "I think you can get down now," Luffy said, pointing to the crowd. Alvida took the chance and started to climb down, getting about halfway before jumping. Luffy was about to jump down, but decided to do what he wanted to from the start. Admire the view. It was all in all, pretty amazing. You could scout out every corner of the plaza from up here. The air smelled of the sea. This was the end of the Pirate King, and the beginning of the pirate era. Luffy smiled as it all flooded his mind. "I'm going to be king of the pirates," he yelled proudly, halting the ongoing battle to be awarded the stairs. Uttering those words would mean you're hunted. To yell them from the most infamous pirate monument in modern history was a loogie in the eye of the Marines. Smoker bit his cigars in half at the decree. This was that rookie he had just read about. Just because he was worth 60 million, he thinks he has the right to make that claim. He lost his tactical thinking and ran from his post, ordering the Marines on how to attack the enemy. With his jeep drawn he aimed square for the pirate's chest. He'd stop this dream of his before he ever entered the Grand Line. Or at least, he thought he would. Lightning crashed down inches from his face, sending him on a new course for a nearby section of concrete. The shocking show made all the Marines gasp. The pirates, however, gasped over a different and far worse turn of events. While Smoker had been scared by the sudden electrical discharge, Luffy had been the recipient of the shock. No one could see exactly what happened to him, but he could certainly feel it. His skin was charred at the sight of the strike. He could feel his blood literally flash boil in his veins, his heart was thrown into a completely new rhythm. His eyes rolled into the back of his head as his brain worked triple time behind the scenes, trying to fix the damage dealt to the once invincible body. Luckily for it, he was beyond human. "Luffy!" His friends yelled in shock, no pun intended, at the sight. With this many Marines, a Logia Marine captain, and Zoro injured, they needed Luffy. Now he was frozen on the top of that execution platform, steam rising from his body. This meant having to fight all of the Marines, getting his smoking body from the center of town, and retreating without their captain. Were they doomed to fail? Was this how it was going to end? Smoker climbed out of the crater he had just created in the ground and groaned. Of course he would be so jarred by the lightning strike that he didn't change form for the crash, just his luck. He scanned the battleground and noticed a shockingly small amount of fighting. What the hell was with those Marines? His eyes then shifted to the top of the platform, where his jaw dropped. Blood was coursing over the boy's body, shooting out and back in. He didn't look like a person anymore, more like a tall and lean blob. The steam arising was rivaling Smoker's, which reminded him to get out 2 more cigars. Nevertheless, it wasn't going to stop him from capturing that pirate, or his name wasn't the White Hunter Smock. Smokey. An older woman's voice rung out through the air, sending a bone-chilling breath through the captain's body. He locked up tighter than if he was addressing an admiral, and every orifice closed so fast it could cut a cigar. Look at you all grown up. Belmere yelled with a smile, implementing her plan. If even a fraction of his old fear still manifested, she could buy Luffy some time. Sir Belmere, sir. Suddenly Smoker was a young cadet once more, being teased and berated by the older woman. The fear and respect hadn't gone away in the years since her service in the Marines, which was detrimental at the moment. At ease, Smokey, Belmere said as she walked to him, grabbing one of his cigars from his hand. You know these are bad for your health, right? She asked as she lit one and popped it in, taking a long drag and blowing it back at him. I don't worry about it, Smoker said, staring back at the platform. He wanted to launch out and take the straw hat while he was doing whatever the hell it was, but that would surely earn him the beating of a career for leaving his once senior officer. I'd love to catch up, but I have pirates too. Oh, don't worry about them. If you're competent, let your men handle them. I'm sure you taught them well enough to take them on. She was lying through her teeth with the best of them. Luffy's crew could easily take on the infantry under any Marine command. But that wouldn't be apparent immediately. Besides, I haven't seen you in years. You were just a little runt back then. Smoker gritted his teeth and grabbed 2 more cigars. He'd need 3 to get through this encounter. Well, I'm no runt anymore. I'm a captain now, and I have a responsibility to stop those pirates. Smoker started walking back towards the fray, ready to capture them all. He noticed the raven-haired boy at the top of the stand was gone, and that was a very bad sign. He turned back to ask if she saw just where the hell he went, but she had vanished. Another very bad sign. Captain Smoker, help! A Marine yelled from the mass, screaming as if he was set on fire and he was holding the fire hose. Smoker rushed to fight but saw no pirates. His Marines were all blood-spattered and shrieking in pain. Where did they go? He yelled out in anger, wondering how they managed to defeat them all. He's on us. It burns. Marines started to yell as they dug at the blood on their bodies, trying to scrape it off. It was bubbling on their skin, a sure sign it was boiling. It left them all shrieking in pain. What do you mean he's on you? What the hell? The blood dripped off of the Marines to their relief. Arms, legs, chests, even faces were left with horrible burns from being encased in the boiling blood. The mass of the bubbling liquid formed into an unstable form that could barely be described as human. Once it took a definite shape, however, it could hardly be called the Straw Hat Pirate from moments before. He was taller, broader, and just less human. A slit of a mouth that wasn't yelling taunts. Blood-red eyes, not bloodshot, completely red. What did you do to my men? Smoker yelled out in anger at the boy before him, demanding answers. But none came. The boy's focus was on the Marines, still writhing from their burns. Smoker gripped his fists tight, waiting for the sound that would determine whether he'd go for a capture or kill. He reached for his jeet and charged when he heard it. Shishishi. He laughed at the agony of his men. Luffy didn't even look up from the ground when he dodged. He could feel the angry charge of the white-haired man. He could feel everyone. His heart was pumping in overdrive after that lightning strike. It was unreal. The blood was coursing through his veins so quickly the vessels would burst in some places, but his body would just fix and reinforce them. Luffy was jittery and red-eyed from the flow. His heart was pumping hundreds of beats per minute in his chest and he could feel every beat. This was causing his blood to boil from the friction, his brain to focus on more details. He was in a primal, almost bestial state of existence. His personality was all but shot off to avoid any long-term damage. Luffy was not in there. Too slow, Luffy uttered before dodging another attack, eyes still on the writing Marines. Feeling the blood in the man acted like a sixth sense that let him dodge attacks he couldn't actually see. Though when he went to counter, his fist went right through the Logia's stomach harmlessly. "You damn monster. I'll make you pay." Smoker knew he couldn't be injured by the blows. Whatever fruit power he may have, it was nothing compared to his. He could fly, avoid bodily harm, and trap people in his smoke. He was the expert pirate trapper. White out, he stuck out his arms and sent out waves of smoke, intent on trapping the boy and sending him to impel down. He'd pay for that twisted assault. The pirate he knew to be the newcomer Luffy was not keen on being engulfed in smoke however, and launched into the air with a massive, concrete-shattering blast. Before he could readjust his shot, a shard made of the boy's blood was launched at him. He merely smirked and let it pass through. "You've never encountered a Logia, have you? Your dirty tricks won't work on me." A paramesha that let him control his own blood, interesting. But useless against him. Luffy roared in response and started focusing on the white-haired man. Whatever he was in the primal eyes of the once carefree boy, it wasn't a human. His arms were smoke, while the rest of him was flesh and blood. Luffy landed back on the ground and focused on the parts of the thing that were flesh and blood. He locked it in place and charged, fist clenched with a single spike protruding from the middle knuckle. If he couldn't hurt Smoke, he'd hurt the body. Smoker brought his arms back and reached for his jeet. Once the boy hit him and got lodged in his chest, he'd counter with a quick hit to the head. He got ready to shift form, but nothing happened. It wasn't the heat of battle. It was one boy for crying out loud. Why the hell couldn't he do something as simple as shift his heart, lungs, ribs, and muscle tissue into smoke? Exclamation mark. He didn't get much time to ponder it however, as the wild animal was on him. With a quick punch, his lung was punctured. That spike was as hard as steel and punched right through one of his ribs. Not only that, the boy was steaming from inner heat and that blood spike was boiling hot. It was excruciating pain he hadn't felt in years. If that wasn't the worst, it wasn't healing back right away like most of the wounds would. His body wasn't cooperating with him. Another 3 blows and he felt like he would legitimately die from a lone teenager, but he pushed off, laughing to himself at the sight of the 4 holes literally punched into his chest. That bastard. Captain Smoker. Tashigi yelled as she charged at the assailant. Who or whatever he wasn't getting away with this. She was admiring the swords and arguing with some lone swordsman not too long before, but after she got distracted arguing with the shopkeeper just giving away such a valuable sword she failed to notice the rushing civilians. After the argument with him, she heard the talk of pirates in the square and rushed as quickly as she could. Only one pirate was left there, and he had just wounded her captain. The infantry had crawled away best they could to avoid him, whoever he was. It didn't matter. He was a pirate and assaulted her superior officer. Tashigi no, Smoker yelled, inadvertently spitting blood back at the boy, not that he wouldn't anyway should he die here. But Tashigi was committing suicide with that attack. He didn't even yell out his attacks and the boy dodged them without looking. She yelled out before she even got there. If he didn't dodge it, he could simply shift his blood like when he attacked his marines and avoid it. This was bad. Luffy looked to the left, the sound where the yell originated, and smiled. A half smile that promised she was going to have a bad time. The sword went harmlessly through one side of his body and out the other. He clotted it in place and examined her. She helplessly pulled the handle, trying to remove the sword from him. Luffy stuck out a steaming hand and grabbed her by the throat, heating it up immensely from skin to skin contact. Luffy, stop playing around, we need to go now. Belmere yelled, re-emerging from her spot now that everyone was handled with. She was a decent enough fighter, but that entire unit and their Logia captain. Not a chance. Luffy may have been cruel, but he hadn't killed any of those honest marines yet and she wouldn't let him start with her. Luffy looked up and started walking. Survival instincts dictated most of the fighting, so now he could follow the order of the voice he knew until he cooled off, which would be soon. The fighting brain he had let him focus on keeping the captain's blood locked in place. He also drugged the woman with him, keeping her mostly subdued through the pressure and heat. She still had one hand on the handle of her sword, however, not willing to concede. Straw hat. Smoker growled angrily as he left his sights. His injuries kept him knelt down, fighting to breathe. He had never been injured this heavily before. It never lasted this long. Something about that boy did this. If he couldn't turn to smoke soon, he'd die. Pirates would have successfully broken through his town. His most trusted subordinate, Tashigi, would be a trophy to that devil of a boy. You are dead. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.